Welcome back to my channel. Today, we will be breaking down the things you should do if police show up to your car window and demand to search without a warrant. A police officer walks up to your car window and says, "We don't need a warrant. Step out of the vehicle." Your heart starts racing. Maybe they say they smell something. Maybe they claim someone reported suspicious activity. Maybe they just repeat the same line louder the second time. "We don't need a warrant." And right there, most people make the mistake that changes everything. Some start arguing, some start explaining, some start apologizing, and some say the most dangerous word possible during a police encounter. Okay, but what if the officer is bluffing? What if they're trying to get your consent? What if they do have legal authority for part of the stop, but not everything they're asking for? What should you actually say? Can they legally search without a warrant? And what do you do without making the situation worse? Because in the next few minutes, you're going to learn the single biggest mistake people make when police say they don't need a warrant, the exact phrases that protect your rights without escalating the encounter, and why staying quiet is often more powerful than trying to sound smart. One wrong sentence can turn a temporary stop into evidence against you. One nervous explanation can accidentally give probable cause. And one moment of consent can permanently waive protections you thought you had. That's the part most people never realize. A lot of people think rights protect themselves automatically. They don't always. In many situations, officers are legally allowed to ask questions designed to get your permission. They may ask for consent even when they're not fully sure they could legally search without it. Why? Because consent makes things easier. If you want to stay one step ahead and never get caught off guard, hit subscribe now. And if this opened your eyes, share it with someone and tell me your thoughts in the comments. If you voluntarily agree to a search, courts often treat that very differently than a forced search. That's why the first thing you need to understand is this. Do not argue the Constitution on the roadside. Do not try to win against the officer. Do not start yelling about illegal searches. Your goal is not to debate. Your goal is to protect yourself legally while staying calm and non-threatening. So let's start with the first major mistake. The biggest mistake people make is talking too much after hearing, "We don't need a warrant." The moment people get nervous, they start explaining. "I don't have anything illegal. You can look if you want. I mean, my friend left that bag there. I was only there for a second." Every extra sentence creates risk, because officers are trained to listen for inconsistencies, admissions, nervous behavior, and statements that can later be used against you. Even innocent explanations can sound suspicious later when replayed in court. That's why one of the safest responses is short, calm, and clear. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." That sentence matters for several reasons. First, it avoids physical resistance. Second, it clearly communicates lack of permission. Third, it preserves an important legal distinction later. Notice what the phrase does not say. It does not accuse the officer of breaking the law. It does not insult them. It does not physically interfere. It simply states your position calmly. And that's important, because courts often look at whether consent was voluntary. Now, here's where people get confused. Refusing consent does not magically stop a search. That's critical to understand. If officers believe they have legal authority under an exception to the warrant requirement, they may still search anyway, depending on the circumstances. For example, laws surrounding vehicles, officer safety concerns, probable cause, plain view observations, or emergencies can change what police are allowed to do. But even if a search happens anyway, clearly refusing consent can still matter legally later. That's why you stay calm. You do not resist. You do not physically block officers. You verbally refuse consents and let the legal fight happen later. Now let's talk about another trap. People think silence makes them look guilty, so they keep talking. Officer says, "If you've got nothing to hide, why not cooperate?" That line pressures people psychologically, and many immediately start defending themselves. But remember this. Your rights do not disappear because an officer tries to make silence sound suspicious. A better response is, "I'm exercising my right to remain silent." Short, direct, respectful.
And the wording matters. You are not being aggressive. You are not refusing lawful commands. You are specifically invoking a constitutional protection. That distinction is important because simply staying quiet without clearly invoking your rights can sometimes create confusion about whether you intended to waive them later by continuing conversation. Now, let's look at another common situation. An officer says, "If you don't let us search, we'll just get a warrant." A lot of people panic right there. They assume resistance is pointless, so they consent. But here's the thing. If officers truly have enough legal basis for a warrant or another lawful exception, they can pursue that process themselves. You do not need to help build the case against yourself by volunteering consent. That's why a calm response matters. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches. I will comply with lawful orders." That second sentence is powerful. I will comply with lawful orders. Why? Because it reduces the appearance of confrontation. It communicates that you are not resisting physically while still protecting your legal position. And that balance matters enormously during police encounters. Now let's talk about movement. One of the most dangerous mistakes people make is sudden motion during tense moments. Reaching into pockets, opening compartments suddenly, turning quickly, stepping towards officers aggressively. Even innocent movement can escalate danger fast. Remember, officers are trained to react to perceived threats quickly. So if you need to reach for identification or documents, communicate first. "My registration is in the glove compartment. Is it okay if I reach for it?" Simple, clear, predictable. That reduces misunderstanding. And when emotions rise, predictability matters. Now here's another major mistake. Trying to educate the officer on the law during the stop. People start quoting amendments, threatening lawsuits, saying things like, "You're violating my rights. You can't do that. My cousin's a lawyer." That almost never helps in the moment. Roadside encounters are not courtrooms. Even if the officer is legally wrong, arguing aggressively on scene usually increases tension, increases scrutiny, and sometimes increases charges unrelated to the original issue like obstruction or disorderly conduct, depending on the circumstances. The safer approach is calm non-consent, not roadside litigation. That brings us to another critical phrase. Am I free to go or am I being detained? This question does several things at once. It respectfully forces clarity. It helps establish whether the encounter is voluntary, and it signals that you are trying to leave rather than continue unnecessary conversation. If the officer says you are free to go, leave calmly. Do not restart the argument. Do not deliver a speech. Just leave. If they say you are detained, then continuing silence often becomes even more important. And if questioning becomes intense or you believe criminal accusations may follow, this next phrase becomes critical. I want to speak to a lawyer. Again, short matters. Clear matters. Once you request counsel, stop speaking. This is where many people fail. They ask for a lawyer, then keep explaining. That can completely undermine the protection they were trying to invoke. So if you request an attorney, actually stop speaking about the incident. Now let's clear up another dangerous misunderstanding. People hear online that police always need warrants. That's not accurate. The law contains multiple exceptions that can apply depending on the facts, location, safety concerns, evidence visibility, vehicle rules, emergencies, and state-specific interpretations. That's why you should avoid making absolute legal claims during encounters. Your goal is not proving the officer wrong in real time. Your goal is avoiding self-incrimination and avoiding escalation. And remember something else. Being rude is not the same as protecting your rights. You can firmly refuse consent without hostility. You can remain silent without sarcasm. You can request a lawyer without acting combative. That tone matters more than many people realize. Officers are human beings responding to stress, uncertainty, and perceived threats in real time. Aggressive behavior can rapidly escalate otherwise manageable encounters. So keep your voice calm, keep your hands visible when appropriate, do not make sudden movements, do not physically interfere, do not lie, and do not volunteer information trying to talk yourself out of things. Because most people don't get themselves into trouble by staying silent. They get themselves into trouble trying to explain too much. So let's put the safest framework together. If police say, "We don't need a warrant," stay calm. Do not argue. Do not consent automatically. Do not physically resist. Instead, calmly say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." If questioning continues, "I'm exercising my right to remain silent." If you're unsure whether you can leave, "Am I free to go or am I being detained?" And if the situation becomes serious, "I want to speak to a lawyer." That combination protects you far more effectively than trying to win an argument on the roadside. And remember, laws vary by state, facts matter, and every encounter is different. This video is educational information, not personal legal advice. But the general principle stays the same almost everywhere. Stay calm, comply with lawful commands, do not consent unnecessarily.